Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about our adaptive immune system. Unlike our innate immune system, our adaptive immune system is not present from birth. The adaptive immune cells are derived from immature lymphoblasts. So if you've watched my hematopoiesis video, then you'll know that these cells originate from a common lymphoid progenitor in the lymphoid arm of the immune system, but there are actually two different types of lymphocytes. So you've got B lymphocytes or B cells, and then T lymphocytes or T cells. And although these cells are functionally very different and they recognise pathogens in different ways, the key features that they share are that they are able to recognise specific pathogens and that they're also able to develop immunological memory. So when a pathogen enters our body, it's immediately detected by the innate immune system. However, the innate immune system is not very sophisticated, so although it can detect a foreign invader, it has no way to determine what that invader is. The adaptive immune system differs because it's able to determine specific pathogens based on very specific antigens that they have on their surface. An antigen is essentially just a molecule that's on the surface of a pathogen. B lymphocytes or B cells produce antibodies, and these are Y-shaped proteins that recognise antigens. So each B cell produces only one unique antibody against a single antigen. If an antibody matches a specific antigen that's invaded the body, this will then trigger the B cell to start releasing lots and lots of antibodies into the bloodstream. Depending on what the pathogen is, antibodies can have different functions. For example, virus antibodies may be able to directly disable the pathogen just by simply binding to the surface of the virus. However, for bacteria pathogens, antibodies bind to the pathogenic antigen on the bacteria surface and act as a kind of label. So this label can then be detected by other cells of the immune system, such as macrophages or T cells, which can come in and destroy the bacteria. Rather than producing antibodies, T cells have a unique T cell receptor or TCR on their cell surface. And again, each T cell will have a TCR that is specific to just a single antigen. In order to become activated, T cells have to be presented with antigens on the surface of cells known as antigen-presenting cells. So this is things such as dendritic cells or macrophages. And depending on the T cell, this can have different functions. So there are two main types of T cells: helper T cells, which, as the name suggests, help to activate other cells. So they help stimulate B cells to produce antibodies. They can also help macrophages, and another type of T cell known as a cytotoxic T cell. And as their name suggests, cytotoxic T cells are responsible for directly killing either pathogens or our body's own cells that have been infected with a virus or maybe become cancerous. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier in the video, another common feature of both B and T cells is memory formation. So unlike innate immune cells, which are often very short-lived, our adaptive immune cells, which we acquire over our lifetime, are usually extremely long-lived. So I'm going to use T cells as an example, but the process is very similar for B cells as well. So once a T cell has developed into a mature T cell, it's first known as a naive T cell. And then if one day we're infected by a pathogen which has an antigen whose shape matches the naive T cell's TCR, that T cell will then become activated, and this activation stimulates extensive proliferation. So we get this huge army of basically clones, which all have the same specific TCR. And this is obviously really helpful because it means that we can try and fight off the infection as quickly as possible. Once the infection is dealt with, most of these clones will then undergo a process known as apoptosis. And essentially this just means programmed cell suicide. So most of these cells are just going to die off. This phase is known as contraction, as the clonal population is contracting back. Because obviously you don't want this huge amount of T cells patrolling our body all of the time if we're not being infected with this pathogen. However, there will be a very small percentage of these clones that will survive, and these cells are going to remain in our body potentially for our entire lifetime. So that's why when we're young children, we seem to get ill all the time because we're constantly fighting off new infections. And we might also find that we're ill for a lot longer when we're younger because we've got to mount these responses from scratch. However, when we grow up and we're developed, we end up with this collection of T and B cells that are already primed against certain infections, so we can fight them much quicker. Okay, so to summarise, the adaptive immune system is a slower but far more sophisticated arm of our immune system. It can recognise specific pathogens and target them in a direct manner. It is also able to develop memory, so it can remember what we've been previously infected with and then tackle it much quicker if we're ever re-exposed to that particular pathogen again in the future. Okay, so finally, thank you for listening to my video. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, then please subscribe to my channel.